This gruesome new detail that a firm missing U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi is no longer alive. A Turkish official tells CNN that his body was cut into pieces after his death. The disturbing news comes after CNN first reported the Saudis are preparing to admit that Khashoggi was killed by accident during a botched interrogation. At least that's according to two sources to CNN. And now the world waits to see how the United States will respond. A senior advisor to President Trump says how the president reacts, quote, may be the most consequential decision of his presidency. That same advisor believes it will show whether the U.S. can continue to maintain a moral high ground on human rights. Today, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Saudi's king and crown prince. So far, no specifics on what was said, but it is clear back here in the U.S. that Republicans are not listening to what the president is saying on Saudi Arabia. Just a day ago, Trump said that the king and the crown prince deny any involvement. But I want you to listen to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham talking today about the crown prince known as MBS.
I've been their biggest defender on the floor of the United States Senate. This guy is a wrecking ball. He had this guy murdered in a consulate in Turkey, and to expect me to ignore it, I feel used and abused. I was on the floor every time defending Saudi Arabia because there's a good ally. There's a difference between a country and an individual. The MBS figure is, to me, toxic. He can never be a world leader on the world stage. So Saudi Arabia, if you're listening, there are a lot of good people you can choose, but MBS has tainted your country and tainted himself.
With me now, CNN's Sam Kiley in Saudi Arabia and CNN's Clarissa Ward, who broke this story for us there in Turkey. So, Clarissa, just starting with you, we know Khashoggi was last seen 14 days ago now walking into that Saudi consulate in Istanbul. What have the Turkish investigators, the forensics team, what have they found?
Well, what a difference a day makes, Brooke. Just 24 hours ago, all the noises were kind of positive coming from the Turkish side. The Saudis were cooperating. They were getting access to that consulate. Now we are starting to hear more shocking details of this truly gruesome crime. A Turkish official confirming to CNN, as you said, that Jamal Khashoggi's body was carved up into little pieces. Still, though, there's a lot of questions. What precipitated that? How exactly was he killed? Who ordered the killing? We know that Turkish investigators spent 9 hours last night at that consulate combing through everything. We heard President Erdogan talking this morning about potentially toxic materials being found. He also made a reference to the fact that there had been some new painting done in the building that potentially, one can infer that there was some kind of a hasty cover-up job by the Saudis. But there's definitely a sense here, Brooke, that Turkish officials are getting impatient. They're discovering certain things through their investigation with forensics experts, 9 hours on the ground, sniffer dogs, soil samples. But what they want to hear is a definitive statement from Saudi Arabia about what happened, how it happened, and why it was allowed to happen, Brooke.
Perhaps some of those answers may come from the Saudis. We wait. Sam, the question to you is, we know Secretary Pompeo is in Riyadh meeting with MBS. Do you know anything about what was discussed between these two?
Only, Brooke, insofar as the readout from Pompeo's people on his meeting with Mohammed bin Salman said that he had in private been direct and candid, which is diplomatic ease for pretty straight talking. In terms of the official announcement coming from his meeting after 15 minutes with the King, nearly 40 minutes with MBS, there was a standard pro forma statement coming from the United States team saying that they were looking for a timely and transparent resolution to the investigation on all sides. This is a real problem for the United States. Not only is there a moral issue here, but in terms of realpolitik, Saudi Arabia is both an economic ally, it is the world's biggest producer of oil, it is a beneficiary, but also a client of intelligence and military hardware shared with the United States. It is a key ally in the broader fight against violent Islamic terror. And the pressures that have been coming from Washington will be heard here in Riyadh, and they are not culturally what country is going to be particularly responsive to calls that the man in charge of the country, effectively the chief executive, MBS, should go. I think that's going to be extremely difficult for them to swallow, and that may have indeed delayed. Are getting some signals that there was going to be a statement, and now there's been a delay as perhaps they're refashioning what they are going to say about this incident, Brooke.
Refashioning, huh? Sam and Clarissa, thank you so much.
Despite mass skepticism in world capitals and on Capitol Hill, President Trump seemed to take the Saudi regime at its word again, tweeting, quote, "Just spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who totally denied any knowledge of what took place in their Turkish consulate." He was with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during the call and told me that he has already started and will rapidly expand a full and complete investigation into this matter. Answers will be forthcoming shortly. Then, in an interview this afternoon, the president once again standing by Saudi denials and lending credibility to their calls for an investigation into what Democrats and Republicans say the Saudis likely ordered.
It depends whether or not the king or the crown prince knew about it, in my opinion. Number one, what happened, but whether or not they knew about it. If they knew about it, that would be bad.
But the president does not seem to think that they knew about it. A senior national security advisor to the president told CNN that Trump's response to the apparent murder and dismemberment of a Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, quote, may be the most consequential decision of his presidency.